Ron Lanton, principal at Lanton Law. And today we have Jonathan Ogurchak, CEO of STACK Compliance Management Software. What's going on, Jonathan?
Hey, Ron, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show and being our first guest for our reboot. So I really appreciate that.
Yo, I'm honored to be number one, that's for sure.
Oh, you're always number one in my book. That's what I got to say. So I know you from a little while back, and I've followed your journey here, and now you're at Stack, which is cool, and I'm seeing all the stuff that's happening with that. For people that don't know you, how did you get in the industry?
Well, Ron, I'm a pharmacist by training and was one of those pharmacists that never really knew where my path was going to take me. I didn't necessarily love hospital. I've actually never worked a day of community in my life, even in school. Don't tell ACPE that. But, it's one of those things where I kind of knew that I was going to have a different sort of path. And right out of school, did a teaching and research fellowship. Wasn't loving it because I just didn't feel like I could have that hands-on experience. And I was just right back in the classroom trying to teach people what that should be like to have hands-on experience. So on a whim, applied for any job that was available, and one just so happened to be at a specialty pharmacy. Never heard of it before, but they were the first one to call me back, offer me a same-day interview, offer me a same-day job, and the rest is kind of history. I've been in specialty for a majority of my career, and really where I got focused in the tech side of that is, I don't know, I've always been kind of a techie, geeky type of person. Like, one of the first people that had an iPod well back in the day. And when I was at the specialty pharmacy, we were looking at doing some things with clinical programs to standardize them and streamline them. And the resources really weren't there. So I just started to Google things, and I was able to hijack Excel spreadsheets to add macros and add buttons and add formulas and all of these things that we could build standardized, streamlined clinical programs. And just because I could Google things and I had an iPhone, people thought that I knew what I was doing with tech. And, really to me, it was so much more than that. You saw that there were these ways that technologies were driving tons of other industries. And it was always confusing me, like why we couldn't do that with healthcare. And, as I moved through my career, I was able to build some cool patient engagement tech. I was able to, then leave there and start to build some of the things that we're building now at Stack. And, I'm just excited for where the future will continue to lead us, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And what was it? iPod, man, that takes me
I
back.
know it's dating myself. I saw the news today that they just discontinued the last iPod Touch, and
Yeah.
that really was like a kind of a dagger in the back, like making me feel old. So
I'll tell you what makes you really feel old. When you get in a car and the new ones, at least there's no more CD players.
yeah, my laptop doesn't have a CD player anymore. Like what do I do with all of these CDs that I carried around in that fancy little zipper
Yeah.
pack in my car for all those years?
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, man. But you know what? That's technology, and that is the field that you're in. And it's funny that we talk about tech because now with the pandemic, I mean, more so than ever, it seems like information, is coming faster, and we're really trying to find ways to make it more portable. And with that, you got a lot of privacy concerns, right? So, just from somebody being in the tech field, what do you make of the state of privacy right now in the US, just with, all these conveniences that different patients want? How does that all play in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, right now it's kind of a tenuous time as it relates to privacy and health tech. We didn't have some of the options available that we do today when things like HIPAA and high tech were drafted in the late 90s, early 2000s. And, we didn't have an iPhone that could act as a little computer that sits in my pocket that gives me accessibility to anything and everything. And, those laws, when they were drafted at a time where it was trying to help to improve data flow and communication in a largely disconnected sort of world. And I think now we're at this crossroads where the convenience is at our fingertips, the need to maintain patient privacy and patient confidentiality is even more critical, yet the guidance isn't necessarily there just yet to help to lead responsibly where those things need to go. You're still trying to to hold accountable individuals with laws that were written 25 years ago. But the technology grows and evolves on almost a daily basis. So it's an interesting place to be. You know that patients want that same level of convenience that hey, if I can log into my app on my iPhone and go to Amazon and order a case of sparkling water and it shows up on my front porch before tomorrow morning, like that's what people are starting to expect when it comes to healthcare and the healthcare delivery model. And it's usually technology enabled. So it's trying to find that happy balance, I think, of where we can still afford the patients the privacy that they want and need, but also better leverage some of these new advances that are now being set forth.
Hmm. And you mentioned how a lot of the laws that were written back in the 90s are outdated, especially with the platforms that we have, Twitter, Facebook, things like that. And should platforms be held accountable? And when I introduced you, I mentioned compliance management software. So I know that that's software as a service. Um, what what can software as a service do for healthcare providers as far as efficiency goes?
Well, software as a service is a relatively new sort of idea. I mean, when you think of, you walk into any pharmacy around the country, and chances are you have a pharmacy dispensing application that was physically installed onto some type of physical hardware device. And that's what drives the day to day of business of most of these organizations. Well, since this advent of software as a service, and we've seen a lot of growth in that area, even over the last couple of years related to the pandemic, it affords the opportunity that you can have these programs that are available no matter where you are. It doesn't require installation of an application. And there's a little bit more from the interoperability perspective where it's helping to create more connectivity to the resources that are out there. That's a thought, and that's been one of our driving forces of some of the stuff we've done at Stack with the applications we're building. Why should I reinvent the wheel? Why should I go out and rebuild a better mousetrap if somebody's doing it really well already? Why can't I take and plug into their API or they plug into mine, and we can build much more effective, scalable, usable sorts of solutions? And it's driven based on that whole concept of software as a service. If that software is there and it's able to integrate those things that you need and do it in a much more affordable, efficient way, to me, that's light years beyond those pharmacy dispensing systems that are just sitting in a fan cold server room somewhere in the back of a pharmacy. It's that type of innovation that I think is going to allow us from a health tech perspective start to see the type of growth from leaps and bounds that we've witnessed in other sectors over the last 20 or 25 years.
Do you see yourself as a disruptor?
I certainly like to hope so. But it's one of those things that I was fortunate enough to be at a specialty pharmacy conference just this past week, and you take a look around the room, and a lot of the things that are being done, there's some really cool, really disruptive ideas. But it's the same model that I saw when I was working in the pharmacy, even 5 years ago. I'd have a vendor coming to me that never set foot in a healthcare facility, but they got some VC dollars and they said, hey, go build a healthcare solution. Well, when I would take a look at it from a practitioner or an operations-based perspective, there's no way that I'd be able to integrate some of these super disruptive solutions because it would disrupt what I needed to keep humming. There's a well-oiled machine that's needed to continue to take care of patients. And if you disrupt that, then it could be life or death for certain patients. And so I like to, I don't know, it's one of those weird things. I never really thought about it. Yeah, I like to think that I'm trying to disrupt by intersecting both of those things, the practical day-to-day of what needs to be done with how you can advance some new technology to get you there to do that. And I think that putting those things together is only going to help more patients and practitioners alike as these new advances are coming forth.
Yeah. I look at healthcare and I'm in the camp of I like disruption, especially with so many inefficiencies that we see within healthcare. Um, I mean, do you, yes or no? Because I always have kind of this debate. Is healthcare, well, actually, should technology disrupt healthcare?
I think if it's done the right way, it should. And when I say done the right way, there's a lot of things that, back to that Amazon example,
Mm,
the ease, the efficiency for that end user being a consumer, technology has revolutionized that care delivery model, and even not so the care delivery, but the purchase model. It's almost like you're thinking back to the Sears Roebuck catalog, whenever that was such an innovation coming out of the Great Depression. And things like Amazon and Target, during the pandemic, I would shop from my phone and I would check in on an app and somebody would put it in my trunk and I'd head home. Like that's wild. If you really take a step back and think about the fact that you couldn't do those things even 3 or 4 years ago, I think if it's done right, it can be very effective. I think the challenge that we face as a healthcare facing healthcare, practicing sort of world is that with great power comes great responsibility. You're dealing with people's lives. You're not dealing with another case of Lay's potato chips that you're having somebody throw in the back of your trunk. And there's a lot that can be involved when it comes to capturing, manipulating, managing data associated to that patient experience, that things could get very out of hand very quickly if there wasn't regulation in place to help to best protect the interest of that patient as the end consumer.
hmm I agree. You mentioned Sears, and it's funny. I'm about to head out to vacation end of this week on Cape Cod, and I mentioned that because where we're staying, we rented an Airbnb. Where we're staying, it talked about how the house was a 1920s historic Sears kit home. So you think about back then, ordering a house on a Sears catalog and, how revolutionary that was to what you're talking about now with Amazon and the one click and it's at your door. And that's, I'm looking at that. I'm thinking, well, gee, should my doctor be one click away? That's why we have the telehealth, now, and that's starting to grow. So you're definitely talking about a lot of change that I think is both necessary and kind of the right time because people, 10 years ago weren't ready for these Zoom meetings, and now that we've kind of been forced into it by the pandemic, it's, well, why wasn't I doing this sooner?
Well, it's funny. I always joke that I wanted to have a T-shirt made that said "I used Zoom before it was cool." And
Yeah.
when we launched our company back in 2019, we were using Zoom to do all of our direct to customer sort of engagement. And it was kind of a funny thing because we'd have individuals hop on a phone call. They get this link, they didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden they could see my screen and I'm talking to them and people were just blown away. And now you say, hey, it's another Zoom meeting. People were sick of it. And so it's kind of funny to see how times have really forced and changed some of that innovation. If you look at things like telemedicine, I remember when I was in pharmacy school, over a decade ago, they're talking about this advent of telehealth and telemedicine. And it really wasn't taking off and it wasn't going anywhere until there was that catalyzing moment
Mhm.
where that's what people needed. And you saw decades worth of development happening overnight to be able to facilitate the needs of the public. And not that you want to see another one of those catalyzing types of events occur, but now that people have proven that it can be done, I think the question is going to become, well, why isn't it being done?
Mhm.
And why aren't we better leveraging technology to take care of people and meet them where they're at?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like that RNA technology, right? Like it was around, and then the pandemic happened, and then it's, we need this for vaccines, and what else can we do? And
You're exactly right. I mean, you're looking at some of the early stage concepts of that being utilized. They were studying it back in the mid to late 90s, and it just couldn't get its teeth into any one sort of application. And now here we are. It's just advanced light years in a matter of months to help develop vaccines that we didn't even know we needed, let alone some of the technologies that now that it's proven and safe, maybe we have a little bit of a different tolerance for advancing the technology in other use cases like HIV and cancer and these areas that might have been a little bit, um, it might have been a little bit gun shy to try to move forward with them in the past.
yeah, yeah, and it always seems like the future is so far off, and you're talking about complex things like HIV and cancer. It's like, God, I know we'll get there eventually, but now you're talking about RNA. It's like, well, maybe 5 or 10 years, or maybe sooner,
Yeah,
So,
you're exactly right.
yeah.
Exactly right.
So, last question before we get out of here. What keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? It's funny you kind of were giving me some thoughts as far as what we're going to talk about. That's the only one that I had blank on my little prep sheet as I'm thinking about what we're going to talk about today. Any number of things keep me up at night. It's from a business perspective, it's it's crazy to think like technology is fluid, technology is fickle, and the things that I quit my job and sold my equity to be a as a specialty pharmacy owner to then go start a tech company. I'm kind of like, are you crazy, Ogorchak? Why'd you do this? Because things can change in a heartbeat. And I think it's, making sure that we future proof our business and our ideas to always ensure that we continue to deliver, but stay at the forefront of what that next tech advancement or integration might be to help make sure that we're not down for the count before we even really get started. I think on a secondary note, part of the reason why I looked to leave, the pharmacy a number of years ago is because you can only do so much in the course of a week. And, at the pharmacy, I was working 70, 80 hours a week. And it was taking away from time that I got to spend with my family. And, my third little one was on the way. And I said, you know what, I can't do this again. I can't be away from the family. And it really helped to reprioritize where these things are. And as the kids are getting older now and they're driving us to baseball fields every night of the week and doing some type of activity, it really keeps me up to make sure that as these advances are happening in healthcare, all of us are going to be affected by it someday. And what are the things that are being done to not advance technologies for me? I might be a lost cause by this point, but what are some of the things that are being done to help my kids and my grandkids someday to ensure that those resources are more widely available? Now, here's a case in point. So we do this ancestry.com sorts of things, and finding all this documentation from my lineage that coronary artery disease has been, since they came off the boat from Italy back in the mid 1800s. That's what they were looking at passing away from. And as we start looking at it, like, well, this is why I've been on statins for the last 20 years. And wouldn't you know it, my oldest son at his his well visit, they did a finger stick because now they're looking at things like coronary artery disease younger in children. And wouldn't you know it, just with the finger stick, he was extremely elevated on a lipid panel. And they now sent him to because they're looking and they weren't before, they sent him for a cheek swab. They did a genetic test, and it's like, hey, we can now confirm that it is this genetic abnormality that is leading your whole family to have high cholesterol. Mm-hmm. And those things weren't around 5 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. Yeah. And to me, it's just, it keeps me up at night to think like, where can we be going with this? So that way, maybe these things are, to your point with RNA technology or cell and gene therapy, like there's going to be cures for these things in our lifetime, where I'm not having to take a pill every day. It's just fixed and it's done and it's better. And, I'm very hopeful for what those sorts of things are going to look to be.
Yeah. And it's cheaper too.
Definitely. Well, yeah, that's for sure.
So where could listeners get a hold of you if they have any more questions offline or want to talk to you about Stack or anything else?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, technology focused and facing here. Just search for me, Jonathan Ogurchak, or you can head to our website. We're available at managewithstack.com. And from there, that's where our users actually log in right from that site to access their Stack accounts. And you can read a little bit more about where we're focused, touching in pharmacy, in education, in association management. And we actually have some other cool things that are coming up here a little bit later this year that you'll see on LinkedIn and everywhere, I'm sure, as they're coming to light.
Sounds good. Well, we'll be there. Thanks so much. I enjoyed the talk, and we'll have to do this again.
Hey, I'll look forward to it. Thanks as always, Ryan.